Hey, it's Matt from Custom Car Grills with a mesh install for the 2019 and newer GMC Sierra 1500. A grill removal video is linked in the description, and once you have it off the truck, let's start to disassemble it. On the back, the black plastic portion is clamping the bezel fasteners in place around the perimeter. Using a flathead screwdriver, I'm just prying back the black plastic part a little bit to allow for the bezel fasteners to pass through. Just work your way around the sides, top, and bottom edges until all of the bezel fasteners are released. Once they're taken care of, then the bezel can be removed and set off to the side for now. There's still some work to do on the back, so let's get this face down again. I want to release the molding that's on the front of the grill. They protrude up a fair bit from the grill and can make the cutting portion of this mod difficult with them in place. Removal of these molding pieces is fairly similar to the bezel. Just open up the fastener and push the tab through. Then repeat for all the other fasteners that are holding each of the pieces of molding on until they're all released. And remove them from the front like so and discard them. Next up is some cutting, and I'll get my Dremel equipped with the number 543 cutting and shaping wheel as well as an open-ended saw blade. The saw blade is great for removing the lifted area where the emblem is. Just a handful of quick cuts around the emblem will do, and then it can be thrown away. Now is where I'll be making some big cuts along the corner where the grill contours in at about 90 degrees. Getting in this corner is a tight fit in some of these spots, but you can imagine how difficult this would be without removing those molding pieces from the front. Just work your way around until the whole perimeter of where the old grill is cut through. After the section is fully cut, it should lift out like so. And then let's get to work with refining this cut a little bit more on the backside. I'm now going to trim that big cut back a little bit further. The cut shown here is about 1/8 of an inch back from the first big cut. In the end, I want the black plastic part to look like this finished cut from a future segment in this video. Here's an outline of exactly where these cuts will end up needing to be for the mesh install. Okay. Back to how we got to that cut line with some cuts that are close to the female part of the grill tabs, but not all the way through them. We need these to still function properly on the lower and side edges, but also need them to allow for clearance of getting the mesh into place. Then I'll just continue along shaving this grill frame support back like so. The bottom and side sections I'd like to think are relatively straightforward. An upper corner like this one really isn't all that intuitive on where to cut, but only a minimal amount needs to be removed. The portion shown here is on the top edge, and this is the trickiest of all the cuts to get right. I'm doing that 1/8 inch cut right now, but the female part of the fasteners for the bezel are being a problem. There's really no good solution for this, and I found that cutting the lower part of the fastener off was the only practical solution. We'll end up bonding these parts together during the mesh install. After a little bit of test fitting, I found that I needed to go back and shave down a couple spots. It can be hard to gauge on how much to remove in some areas without putting the bezel back on and test fitting the mesh piece, so I'd encourage trying to do that a few times. Speaking of the bezel, with the grill that I got, the bezel was a dark gray or blue, and I'm going to black it out. Starting with some Spray Max 1K primer filler, and then I'll hit it up with a few coats of the Spray Max 1K trim paint in matte black. Both the primer and paint go on smooth and dry fast, and look at how nice this bezel turned out. With all the cuts made and the bezel painted, we're now ready for the mesh install. And speaking of that, here's a look at the mesh piece that we have for sale on our website. This is pre-cut and pre-bent specifically for the 2019 and newer GMC Sierra 1500 that's shown in this video. The mesh is made from our heavy-duty Perf SS mesh, which is aluminum and has been coated with a gloss black powder coat. To install the mesh, let's lay the grill frame face down. I'll scuff up the back edge of the grill to make sure that we have some good grip for the bonding agent. I'm just using some 80 grit sandpaper and moderate pressure on the areas where the bezel will come into contact with the mesh as well as the black plastic support. Then snap the two parts of the grill together. The bottom and sides should have a firm grip, but the top edge will be a little bit loose since we cut part of the fastener. Next, place the mesh on the back of the grill like so, with the bent tabs facing the front of the grill. To temporarily fasten the mesh and grill together, I'll grab some cable ties and foam. The foam will help protect the finish of the grill, and the ties will keep the mesh in place while the adhesive cures. I'm just simply looping the tail end of the tie around the grill frame and through the mesh, and then fastening the tail end of the tie to the head, with the head of the tie on the back of the mesh. This usually gives the best hold, but there's a couple things to note about using ties like this. The number one thing is to not over tighten the ties because I don't want to distort the frame. The other thing to be mindful of is the positioning of the ties. Having the tie up too high can shift the mesh around and mess up the positioning. I like to feed the tie through the first available opening that's in the area that I'm aiming for. When tying the mesh on the top edge, it's fine to tie right over top of the bezel tab like this, but be mindful that you'll need access to the tab when it comes time for the adhesive. Once you think you have it all tied up, then flip it around and check the front to make sure that it looks right. On this one, there doesn't seem to be any gaps, and I don't see any obvious signs of distortion, so I think we're good to go. Let me just snip off the tail ends of the ties real quick so that they don't get in the way. Okay, for this install, I'm going to use the Plyo Grip Plastic Repair number 3, though other 2-part repair materials such as the 3M version should work just as well. And before applying this, I'll add on one extra step, and that's to use an adhesion promoter. In addition to scuffing up the back of the grill, I want to make sure that we get a super good bond, so I'll use just a little bit of this and then wait for it to fully dissipate. Now it's on to dispensing some Plyo Grip. I'm getting the nozzle in and around the mesh in the grill frame area. I want to seal the mesh to the back of the bezel, and then I'll make another pass where I bond the 2 parts of the stock grill together as well. Using a small brush on the areas with repair material on it can be helpful for spreading the material out more evenly and getting it in every place you want it to go. I'm being very mindful not to spill any of this material through the front, because doing so will be seen when this is reinstalled, and we don't want anything like that to happen. When it comes time to do the upper edge, I'm just pumping in a lot of the repair material. I'm trying to bond the bezel and grill support together by doing this. Since we cut the bottom part of the female end of the fastener off in a previous step, this is really just the best solution we have. After the mesh is taken care of, I'll make another pass where I'm applying the remainder of the cartridge on the seam between the bezel and the support. This just adds another layer of strength so that the grill will stay together. After about 30 or 40 minutes, I came back and cut off the ties and threw them away. The mesh install is now complete. Let's flip this around and see how it turned out. Wow, this looks awesome! The all-black design is super sleek, and the large slotted mesh pattern is a good fit for this application. Here's a rendering of how this grill should look like on a Sierra when installed. This is a good blank slate to work with if custom lettering or emblems want to be added, or it really just stands on its own as a badgeless, stealthy look. Overall, this is a fun weekend project with a big payoff as far as changing the look of the truck up. I look forward to seeing some installs of this grill from owners. Well, that's all I have for this video. I hope you liked it, and if you have any questions, just let me know, and thanks for watching.